Crypto Titans, How Trillions Were Made and Billions Were Lost in Crypto. And today, guys, we have the author of the book, Markus Thielen, who's also on the verge of building the biggest financial firm that deals in crypto investments. So firstly, Markus, thank you so much for doing this. Really, really appreciate, you taking your time. And what I'm really curious to find out is, what you wrote in this book. And I'm pretty much sure that our listeners will definitely like to know more about it. Now, before we start, Markus, just wanted to check, how are things so far and how has your week been so far?
Yeah, it's of course, very busy with all the news about Binance and Coinbase. A lot of those things are already like covered in the book, so it's not much new yet, but it's been, very busy. A lot of people getting in touch. Everybody wants to know what's going on and what's happening next.
Absolutely. And this last week, I think so, Gary Gensler is in absolute fire mode because, we had Binance and now we have Coinbase. And I wouldn't be surprised maybe the next few weeks or next few days, there might be something else as well. But I'm definitely not hoping for that. And can you tell listeners, Markus, a bit about yourself and your journey in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space? Because as I mentioned earlier, you're currently building the largest crypto investment firm in the world. And what I really like is when I go through your LinkedIn profile, you constantly provide updates. And I'm pretty much sure listeners will definitely like to know your history and your background of getting into the cryptocurrency space as well.
Yeah. So as you just mentioned, I write a lot on LinkedIn. I write research for institutional investors, and I have been in crypto for a while, and I work for different crypto tycoons, and that kind of give me like a different insight, especially on the mining side, on the digital asset fund management side as well. And I think, especially LinkedIn has become really like a good medium to really communicate. And, some of those posts that I, had last few days had really like 40 something thousand views. And there were like several of them. So I'm reaching a lot of people. I think there's a lot of interest what's happening. And of course, you are limited to a specific amount of sentences or words you can write. So it's relatively short, but it's kind of like 10 bullet points or 10 sentences, and it kind of brings the message across.
Absolutely. And what our listeners should do is, definitely follow you on LinkedIn, because what I like about your LinkedIn post is, it is very short, concise, and directly to the point. And then, the listeners can definitely go out and do more research. And speaking of research, you're also the head of research at Matrixport, right?
Yes, Matrixport. And Matrixport was started by Jihan Wu, who is one of the early mining I guess, entrepreneurs in the crypto industry. So he started literally in 2012. At one point with his partner, he controlled 80% of all the mining machine equipment market. So he has been in the industry for a while. And, one of his enterprises is really Matrixport, which serves a lot of institutional clients in the region. It's quite active. It also oversees expansions. And, I help there in educating people and really kind of helping to shape the narrative, where to invest, how to invest, and ideally where we make the next bit of money in the industry.
Absolutely brilliant. Then what I'll do is, the show notes below, I'll definitely go ahead and mention all the details of your company as well. Now, the big question, Markus, is you've written a book titled Crypto Titans, How Trillions Were Made and Billions Were Lost in the Crypto. Absolutely fantastic title. Now, to our listeners, can you give a very brief overview of what the book is and what is it that the readers can learn from it?
Yeah, in the very snapshot is really that this book looks at the crypto industry, how it started, how it evolved, who are the main players, really from 2009 very quickly through the years, and it really focuses on the four crypto bull markets in 2011, 2013, 2017, and 2021. What were the drivers? What were the narratives? How does it all started? What was a big impact on prices? And I think if you read it over the weekend, everybody will have a really good understanding and overview of the market. And I think you don't find this anywhere else. And I don't think anybody picks up a book, What is Blockchain? But I think people can pick up this book and you read it over the weekend and you're like so much smarter.
Absolutely. What I really liked is, the name. Once again, going back to your LinkedIn post, it's very short and sweet, extremely, extremely catchy. Have you written any previous books as well? Any articles, or do you have any Substack channel or that listeners can follow as well?
I have a Substack channel. I mean, it's called the DeFi on Target, one word. I have around 6,000 regular readers in it. So that's kind of like another way to kind of channel it if people don't want to follow, let's say, LinkedIn and rather prefer to get, an email once or twice a week. It's really not that frequent, but again, we comment on really, substantial things. It's really, where we wrote something, or I wrote something, earlier this week about, Binance, and then of course about the whole Coinbase issue and how it's evolving. Really like updating there and really trying to educate people. But my background is actually more on the hedge fund side. I used to run my own hedge fund. I used to work for a $40 billion hedge fund as a portfolio manager there, and I worked on large proprietary trading desks. So my analysis is always, okay, what is the conclusion? How can we make money? That's really, I guess, 90% of the stuff I write. That really, we're trying to figure out how to really make money, and that's why really in the industry. Sometimes, of course, if there's some lawsuit right now what's going on, there's not really like a trading idea that comes out of it, but it's more really kind of like, understand, trying to help everybody understand what's actually going on. Is it really a surprise, or has this been kind of prepared already on various sites or not?
Absolutely fabulous stuff. Now, Marcus, take us back to in time. And what is it that motivated you to write a comprehensive history of the crypto industry of the time period that you mentioned, that is from 2009 right till 2023?
Yeah, for a lot of people, crypto seems to be like all random. It seems to be something popping up there, kind of crashing down, rug pull here, rally there and everything. But to really make sense of it, I kind of like discovered there's actually sometimes, a regulatory cycle. Everybody, of course, knows about the Bitcoin mining halving cycle, and some say it's 3 years, some it's 4. It seems to be a little bit like random as well. But I think very often, you see there is a movement of innovation, and there's where the regulator kind of like steps in and kind of kills the market a bit, and then we just going through a period of consolidation. And for me, it was really, let's say, from TradFi, you look back and, oh, this one event had like a big impact, and then we had like a big bull market or a big crash or whatever. And I think I tried to look at these things in the crypto market as well. There, what was the kind of, the one thing that really started, for example, the 2021 bull market? What was the one thing that really, let's say, killed the 2017 bull market? And I was kind of trying to look at it, and the idea is really for the readers of this book to, just kind of have it maybe as a reference guide, but also B, really just like understand, that there are different cycles and the different drivers of those cycles. So it's very difficult to look back and look for to the same drivers. The yield farming cycle, is the yield farming cycle coming back and driving the next bull market? It will probably be something completely new. And I think it helps people and readers to really be on the lookout for those things. And I think that's what I wanted to achieve.
Absolutely brilliant stuff. And what I really liked is, in the book overview, you mentioned about different bull cycles. And I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2013. And I do have to agree that as time evolves, the narrative has also changed. So, when Bitcoin launched, the whole idea was, it's internet money, then it was blockchain or Bitcoin. The narrative keeps on changing. Now, your book, Marcus, pretty much sure covers all of these things. Now, what I'd really like to do is, break down the book in 6 essential parts. And I think you did actually give me the information on what 6 parts. And you do cover the 4 bullish cycles. Now, part 1 of the book, Marcus, discusses Bitcoin and the hype of internet money, and also talks about Mt. Gox exchange, which happened in Japan. So what are the key learnings, and where did you gather all the information regarding that particular chapter of the book?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke, of course, with some people. I did a lot of research. So I'm actually having references to 631 references in the book. So it's heavily researched. And I think the idea really is to, to also understand how the industry evolved from its really infancy, where people were just able to buy, people were able to buy and sell, then people were able to borrow, then people were able to trade futures, and then with different forms of futures. So it all really like evolved that the technology stack needed to really be built for all this. And of course, we have this in the futures market in TradFi. It's like very different. But I think here, of course, with Mt. Gox, I remember, a friend and colleague of mine, he bought Bitcoin in January 2013, and I was sitting next to him, and we were looking how it works, and it took like a week to get the confirmation from Mt. Gox, and you had to do it with credit card. and you couldn't really buy, a bigger size because of the limits and everything. And a week later, only knew that, okay, here's your confo, this is your price, and it was just all like zero transparent, and then you had it, and how can you like change it? And I think it is very interesting how initially that really Mt. Gox was kind of controlling like 70 to 80% and sometimes even more of the market. And I think we have seen this over time that a few exchanges really had so much volume and were controlling the market. And then kind of, after like 3 years, there was like a new winner basically in the field. And I think this is what we have seen over, the relatively short history, but we have like kind of like 12, 13 years where the market became a bit more active. But I think it's really interesting how the exchange really failed to stay on top for a number of years. And without making any prediction now what's going to happen now, but we could also be up for another incumbent coming in and trying to claim leadership.
Absolutely, definitely possible. I'm pretty much sure, our listeners will be intrigued by that. And I remember in 2013, you could also buy Bitcoin via eBay. And, that was the time I got introduced to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin in particular. And what I wanted to find out is that in that particular section, is there any mention about Bitcoin Jesus, that is Roger Ver by any chance?
Yeah, of course. He is part of it. And it's actually very interesting because I think what is interesting is that he actually was very close to where the exchange was based, and when the exchange imploded, he really kind of like ran over there and looked into it, and I think one thing I kind of like came across is that he called his like sort of like high school friend Jesse Powell, to help out and identify a little bit how much Bitcoin there was really in the exchange, and they helped them to kind of clarify a few things. But of course, Jesse Powell started Kraken exchange later on, and I think that is really, I think interesting how this thing whole evolved, and yeah, I think Mt. Gox was a different animal. It had a different, I think, reasons to help scale the Bitcoin market. And as you said, the narrative have changed because also the technology stack has changed over time. But initially, it was really a new form of money. Payment companies were launched and started. It was really also a Silk Road where people paid. I mean, it's good to hear that you use it on eBay and maybe not on Silk Road. And also WikiLeaks. Also, WikiLeaks was able to accept it. And I think this was also part. But I think that's why also some of those cryptocurrencies have a little bit the bad reputation because they were, involved in some of those little scandals initially.
Absolutely, and I do remember that time the narrative that was going on so far as Bitcoin is concerned, that it is more like a play money or internet money. And fast forward to 2023, that narrative, if Bitcoin is a sound money, has definitely evolved. Now, the part B of the book talks about China. And what I particularly think so far as, China and India are concerned, they have a love-hate relationship, more of a hate relationship, particularly to do with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Now, in part 2 of the book, what can listeners expect regarding China's role, particularly in the early stages of Bitcoin?
Yeah, what few people actually know is in 2013, it was really a pivotal market for the crypto industry. First, in the US, they started the financial crimes enforcement regulation. This really caused for crypto companies there to get more licenses. Those licenses, they cost like $50,000 to $100,000. So it wasn't really, that big of a deal. Of course, for any startup, it's a big deal. But it really took a year or two to get those licenses. And I think that's when the crypto industry moved more towards Asia, where it was really scaled. And also in 2013, it was really in China where they really improved the Bitcoin mining process, where suddenly machines were developed that were really like 100 times faster than the normal desktop PCs, where people in the US started really mining Bitcoin, and this really set off the mining industry in China. And then the government also started to really promote Bitcoin as a new form of money. There was a state sponsored CCTV documentary. It was 30 minutes. And this, of course, really praised Bitcoin as a new form of money. So a lot of people in China became really interested in 2013, and it set up a bull market where we actually had a 5,000% percent return, and this was really like a big driver back then.
Absolutely brilliant stuff. And part 3 of the book talks about the so called first world computer, also known as Ethereum. And that actually did drive the whole ICO craze. And later on, you also mentioned about stablecoins and what role does it play in cryptocurrencies in part 3 of the book. So, can you tell our listeners the whole ICO craze and what is it that listeners can expect, particularly in part 3 of the book?
Yeah, people are actually surprised how much money was raised during these ICOs, but the biggest surprise was also a little bit how Ethereum was started and actually survived, because Ethereum started, initially Vitalik was a journalist, and he started to develop some theories what he can do, and he came across somebody else who had those ideas and who was a little bit more experienced, and I think he took a little bit this other person's ideas. And of course, he became, very well known then over time. But I think also initially Ethereum struggled a lot because, the money that they raised, they had it initially in Bitcoin, and then the Bitcoin price really dropped a lot. So suddenly the Ethereum Foundation was actually suffering, from a lack of capital. And I think that's also an interesting development because there was also then a Chinese company to really help them out. And I think the other aspect is also how this everything is like intertwined also with the start of USDT with Tether, how Tether fits in and who were the people behind it and how that evolved. And I think that's also like an interesting story that's also really covered in the book.
That's absolutely great, and I'm pretty much sure listeners will definitely be curious to know more about this particular part. And it's great that you mentioned about the early stages of Ethereum because I do remember that one of the events, or rather the earlier events, was actually sponsored by Microsoft. And Microsoft back then they had their mobile phone as well. So they had a massive logo of their mobile phone stating, thank you to Microsoft for sponsoring some of the earlier Ethereum developer conferences as well. And you also touched base upon a Tether USDT, which we'll definitely talk about it. And in my Crypto and Coffee Date podcast today, I did actually mention a little bit about Tether USDT as well. Now moving on to part 4, then this is, I believe, your area of specialty, which talks about DeFi. And unfortunately, there were a couple of mergers in terms of, the COVID-19 when DeFi was evolving as well. Now, part 4 highlights the rise of Binance also, and it also touched bases on one of the most iconic firms, or two iconic firms, that is Alameda Research and Three Arrows Capital. So tell our listeners in part 4, what is it that you can expect?
Yeah, part 4 is, I would say, really, the meat of the book, because it, a lot of people can relate to it. A lot of people have been involved in the crypto markets, during that time. And it's really interesting, of course, how those companies, Binance, was really started. And it was a little bit like, copied then later on, through Alameda and with its spin-off exchange, you can call it like FTX. And I think the interesting aspect really, the book answers really how Binance was able to scale so quickly, how they grew so quickly, what did they do. And I think even like over the last few days, the news about the SEC and Binance, I mean, this is basically like all in the book. It really just explains, and it's really like an evidence and fact-based book, I might call it, and I might say it. It's really, it shows really, kind of like I guess the strategies Binance has been, deploying in moving capital and tokens around. And I think it's really like a remarkable company, how quickly it grew, and, the ecosystem it has really, captured. And I think the aspect that really I found very interesting is, I think Alameda had initially, let's say, good intentions and was really like trying to make money through arbitrage. But of course, arbitrage is, very difficult. It is temporary. It doesn't stay for a long time because normally high arbitrage spreads, they attract a lot of established players. And then those players will arbitrage away those spreads. And then, of course, there were, with the development of the crypto market, with the DeFi summit and everything, Alameda also changed, and of course they saw a lot of value in starting an exchange, and maybe to get capital, maybe to get better access, maybe there was a lot of value created. And really, the book also describes really how the traders at Alameda changed. What were they looking at? At one point they were of course very focused on Dogecoin, and then trying really trading the ups and downs of the market. And I think that's really just also like a really interesting aspect.
Absolutely, from a legend to an absolutely notorious character. And I'm pretty much sure that this particular section, a lot of the developers and even people who are actively involved in the cryptocurrency space will definitely would want to read through it, maybe even read through it twice or thrice. Now, the fifth part of the book, it talks about the 2021 year, which was essentially the year where Bitcoin did actually reach an all-time high. And that was also the collapse of an algorithmically backed stablecoin that is Terra Luna. And also we know the notorious collapse of FTX exchange. So part 5 of the book does essentially deals with both of these areas, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I started writing the book actually almost like a year ago when we were at the FTX conference. And this whole kind of episode, of course, gave me like a front row seat, because also my previous boss in the firm where I worked, he was actually leading the Binance US round in April 2022. So I was very close to like a lot of those events, and to a lot of close to those people basically. And I think it really came as a big surprise to a lot of people. I remember this, quite vividly when, slowly, the Terra stablecoin started to depack and what happened there. And now we saw like a lot of TVL outflow, and it was really like an interesting like episode. And I mean, I almost like look at it now, you're reading like a book. I mean, a history book sounds like a little bit boring, I think, for the crypto market, but I think, most people have lived through it. And I think it really helps to really, sharpen your skills by learning and by reading some of those events. But it's a little bit, reading a book about World War II in like 1946 or 1947, going through the events, and maybe you have been there. And I think, last year there were all these bankruptcies, and it was really, it seemed to be happening, so much, but in slow motion, same time. It was almost all predictable, until the market kind of calmed down. And of course, the big shock was really like the FTX implosion, and went very fast. And of course, there's a controversy around, who leaked the balance sheet of Alameda, and there are different stories and different versions around it. And then, of course, the events of the FTX exchange, which is actually in the last part. But yeah, the stablecoin, I think, is really like the meat, and then the bankruptcies of the other, I guess, liquidity providers or lenders. That's really part 5 of the book.
Absolutely, and I do believe that there was some rumors stating that maybe BlackRock may have been involved in the collapse of, Terra Luna. And one thing which I remember, Marcus, when CZ did actually mention the tweet regarding FTX's exchange where, he's no longer part or he wants to sell the shares. What I did was that very same tweet, I showed it to my niece because she's very active on Twitter. And I told her, this might be something massive, and it will literally see in the next few days the collapse of probably, if not one of the biggest collapse in cryptocurrency industry. Now, what I do feel is that, Netflix might, or rather would have already started a documentary. And I think it'd be really cool if they actually contact you and take some insights or you see some information from crypto titans. I think that will definitely be cool. Now, part 6 of the book deals with the legend and the icon Sam Bankman-Fried. So, can you tell us, our listeners, what is it they can expect? And are there any positive things that one can take from the legend Sam Bankman-Fried as well?
Yeah, I think the interesting aspect really of this book is really it just doesn't focus just on one person. I mean, writing, let's say, a 300-page book just about like one person and one company might be just like a little bit boring, because we all want, some fast-paced, I guess, attention in the crypto market. And so the last part, and let's say it's like 20, 30 pages, it describes really about FTX and especially like the relationship among the people within the Alameda industry firm and everything, how they were trading, how they changed and everything. But I think the aspect here really is it tries to really like draw in kind of the high level things that people are maybe not really aware of, because Alameda and of course then later on FTX was also scrambling for getting banking relationships and setting up bank accounts. And they actually started like some sort of e-commerce company to really just like pretend they were like an e-commerce shop to get the banking account. And I think it describes a little bit this, what people did and who are the engineers that have been like building some stuff. And I think it's really like a surprising like development, at least to me, where it seems not just kind of like the little mistake that Sam, Bankman-Fried was always like talking and denying really until the last moment or until now really. So it's really like there's just like a lot of evidence that things have been orchestrated really from the beginning, and corners were cut really along the way, and it's just really quite remarkable.
So do you think it was sheer lack of innocence, or do you think it was intentional, or what is your broad outlook on that?
I think the evidence really points to that, and I think this is really like a problem for many crypto firms. They want to go from A to B, but then the road is blocked because you cannot get a ride. And of course, here the comparison is, the ride is really like the bank, right? The bank doesn't want to deal with crypto firms, so what you do, you're just finding like a different way to get there. And I think because some of the regulations are not in place, some of the service partners are not willing to deal with them, they had like no choice really, and then they were looking for a shortcut, and they hoped the regulation would be there eventually. And until then, I think people were like kind of fine to find this little shortcut. But I think eventually these shortcuts, exploitation of these shortcuts became like bigger and bigger, and I think this is what really caused a big problem in the end, because it's how things start, right? They start with a small lie, and suddenly you get away with it, and then you go and bigger lies. And I think this was the case here as well.
Absolutely, and I think our listeners, will definitely get loads of information on that particular part as well. And in my episode that I released today, Crypto and Coffee, I did actually mention, is this some kind of payback to, let's say, Binance, because they were notoriously known, and if the left-leaning administration of Gary Gensler is kind of politically motivated to go after cryptocurrency exchanges, guess only time will tell. Now, what I wanted to ask next, Marcus, is you have received several praises regarding the book from some of the OGs such as Tim Draper, even Jian Wu, who's the founder of Matrixport, and you also sent me a picture where the Winklevoss brothers did actually endorse or even support the book. So can you tell our listeners how did that thing come about? Because it's absolutely massive.
Yeah, and one idea actually I have is that I take one version of the book and I let a lot of those OGs kind of sign it, and eventually when I have like enough signatures in the book, then I will like hand it over for some charity auction or something like this. So, I mean, I thought this is kind of like really like a cool thing where you have like, I don't know, let's say 15 of these OGs kind of sign the book, and and maybe you donate it for, I don't know, for some education, for some school, or really just hand it off for for charity. And I think there is enough OGs in the book. I mean, who knows if everybody will endorse it? Some are under house arrest, so it's difficult to really get to them. Others might be a little bit shyer now about the events over the last few days, but some people are like lined up, and I think through my connections, I think most people within the book are really one or two steps away in terms of the circle and the network. So it should be reachable. And I have three, and I think in 2 weeks I get the fourth one, and I'm working on the fifth one, and so on. And the plan is really to get like the signatures of like 10 people. So the Winklevosses not only took a picture with the book, but they also signed it inside. So this is like a step towards that.
What would be really cool is that you have a signature of Satoshi Nakamoto without any pictures, of course. That'd be really, really crucial. One thing what I wanted to find out is in the book Crypto Titans, are there any mentions about Dan Larimer or EOS by any chance?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because I do remember they had raised $4 billion. And I think what our listeners should know is that Michael Saylor did actually sell them the domain name voice.com for $30 million. And it looks like the project has completely disappeared. So it'd be really cool, if there are some information or maybe some follow-up work on Dan Larimer, or as Fluffy Pony, one of the maintainers from Monero, calls it, Dan Larimer's fourth scam. So definitely cool area of research on this. Now, based on your experience in writing the book, Marcus, what I wanted to find out is, were there any surprising moment that you learned that you were doing the research and you had no idea about it, or what was the biggest takeaway from that book?
Oh, I mean, actually, there were so many surprises. I mean, the one, without really giving away a lot of those surprises, But one thing was really that some of these early, let's say, mining investments, people made like 500 times their investment. I mean, there is a story where somebody in 2012 invested 1,000 bitcoins in the mining project, and a year later he made like 500x his money. There's one of the I guess one of the largest exchanges over the last few years. Not Binance, not FTX, but another exchange that I'm sure a lot of people will know. Um, was initially started by a 17-year-old who programmed the exchange within a week. And then the source code of the exchange was leaked, and then the other exchange was like built on top of it. But it was definitely like, programmed. So it's, the interesting aspect is also that a lot of those successful crypto, call them just like project, were really started by very, very young people. And I think that's also, very, very motivational, because it's all about really skills. What can you do? And, how smart are you? And I think this is like a big, motivational story also for people, that, you don't have to have a PhD. I mean, of course, some people within the Ethereum community, have PhDs and are, extremely sophisticated. But I think there are also others who have never set foot in the university, and, maybe have not even finished secondary school. And I think these are also coming up really some interesting, like, motivational stories, right? Or the other aspects, it's a little bit what I touched about earlier already. Some of those mining, I just call them mining geniuses in China. I mean, they build like machines. They could like generate and mine Bitcoin so fast that you could make your money back if you get your hold on one of these machines within a week. I mean, this was like, but they said it conservatively as the price of the machine is as much as it would cost you, or as it takes you to mine Bitcoin for 1 month. I mean, basically you invest today, and in a month's time you have your money back, and the rest is just like all upside. I mean, this is like, and of course, the margin was like not 10% or 20%. The margin on these machines was like 20 times, because people just wanted to buy the machine. And this is when really the industry moved from the US to China. And I think this was very interesting, to kind of like read a little bit these people behind it. And I actually have a lot of pictures, and I want to put all these pictures on the website as well. There's people, I mean, it's like part of history, right? I mean, it's just very interesting how, how this all evolved and everything. I think it's just, again, you can read it over a weekend, and I think, people will just not put the book down. They will just read it the whole weekend, and maybe even forget to eat and sleep, and just get over it. It's just,
That is absolutely brilliant. And I do envision, maybe a series on Netflix where, you uncover a couple of areas. And one thing which I did mention earlier would be really cool if they do take some insights from the book. And one thing you mentioned about Bitcoin mining, and I'm not sure if you know about this, but Abu Dhabi is planning to have Bitcoin mining operations. And for listeners, you should know that it's ridiculously hot right now. It's 50 degrees. So how does this mining work? Because the equipment gets hot. And one of the ideas is to actually make the Bitcoin mining underground, because the weather gets ridiculously cold, and some iconic people like Kevin O'Leary may be a part of the Bitcoin mining as well. And recently, let's say a week ago, there was this news about Marathon Digital Holdings. They recorded maximum Bitcoin mining profit, and this is mostly for listeners from UAE, because they are planning to have the operation set up in Abu Dhabi as well. So, if you're from UAE, you definitely need to check out the book, and maybe even contact Markus regarding mining operations, and definitely seek some really powerful investment advice as well. Now, what I want to ask you, Markus, now you've written this book. Is there a specific chapter or quote from the book you would want listeners to particularly focus on?
Well, one thing I realized, and the book has been published, less than a month now, but it's turning out some sort of like a reference guide, let's say, for myself. The Binance news that just happened, I just can go to chapter 166 to page 166 to 179 and just reread these pages, and I'm kind of like aware of what happened. And 2 weeks ago, CZ tweeted about the CCTV in China, the state TV, also talking about Bitcoin and Bitcoin in Hong Kong again. And he kind of was referencing this as a bullish factor. And, you look back in the history book and you just look at the index, it's like, oh, CCTV we had before, page, I don't know what page it is, but let's page 54. Yeah. And let's just quickly reread what happened in 2013, and then just kind of build with like a little view. So I think it's really like, you kind of like go to you go to reference guide as well about some of these things that has happened, and it's just like a fun read. I mean, the feedback has been like very strong, so don't want to set expectations too high, but yeah, feedback is good.
Absolutely, and but I do feel that in the near future, the next generation, they will definitely be doing some more research and they'll be doing some theses and writing dissertation papers. It'll be really cool. Maybe important as well, to use your reference as the book. And as you mentioned, there are well over 600 references in your book. So, I'm definitely hoping Crypto Titans will definitely be there. Now, since last quarter of 2022, there is this massive hype about ChatGPT, and there is also AutoGPT, and this is definitely taking the world by storm. Now, did you get a chance to use ChatGPT or any of the artificial intelligence softwares in writing the Crypto Titan?
No, the book is written really by a human, because it requires a lot of uh, correct correct research. And of course, with the new technology, it sounds good, but I think a lot of people have also like pointed out that for really, let's say, more academic or really more in-depth research, you better really double and triple check, the sources, that everything is like correctly coded. And I think the interesting aspect really that also the book tries really to have like the same narrative through the different stories, that really tries to link all the stories. So it's really like a handover from one story to another, and it's rarely like that something like stops and then something completely new starts, because the whole thing in crypto is that it's really interconnected. And I think the problem something like ChatGPT might have with the whole crypto is because it's the bits and pieces are really not all connected yet. So it's not really that it can go into like a full written like story about all this and just pick the best one. So it doesn't really exist in the format. And I think this is the problem with ChatGPT. Of course, it cannot really tell you anything, let's say, completely new. It just goes back and kind of references everything, and then this ties together this way.
Absolutely correct. And what I'm really liking, Marcus, based on my conversation with you, is that I do have this feeling that there might be another book or two coming up as a follow up on this book as well. And keeping that thing in mind, where do you think, in which direction is, let's say, the future of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, DeFi and blockchain technology is heading towards that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we have to just like look at it. There's like around 60 billion US dollars of venture capital has been going into crypto projects over the last kind of like 12 to 30 months. And of course, crypto firms usually, or venture capital firms, they give them money, and then there's like a runway of around like 3-4 years usually that the companies can survive. So I think we just have to assume that somebody else will come out with something, monumental and really drive the market. I think, of course, right now, the I don't want to call it the card of decks, but the cards are being like reshuffled a little bit with regulation and everything. But a lot of people are still very enthusiastic, working on it. Every major university is having like the smartest people really working on crypto. So I think everybody's like, trying to really bring this industry forward. And it's just a matter of, which region is offering the best regulatory framework. And we know there are some, entities in Asia, some in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, in Bahrain, that are very, very active and very supportive. And I think these can be like the new hotbeds of innovation. And I think there are around 420 million cryptocurrency holders in the world. So they're actually more crypto holders than Buddhists. I mean, this is really like a large number. So I think it cannot be stopped. I think the demand is there and the interest of people are there. And I think we just have to, be part of it and really then catch the next wave, because I'm very sure that there will be, a bull market number 5 coming.
That is absolutely great. And one thing which you mentioned is, about the different regulatory concerns and also some of the countries that are do taking a step. And one thing that I can proudly say is that Dubai's Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority, they're definitely proactive and supportive as well. And I'm not sure if you know the CEO of Dubai's Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority has also lived in Singapore for quite a few years as well. So, it's going to be really interesting. And what I think is 2024, post the halving, it's going to be really interesting to see which country does actually have a competitive advantage, keeping in mind the regulatory landscape. Now, one question, Marcus, which I wanted to ask is, and this is more to do with DeFi. Now, in 2022, or rather the first week of 2022, the total value locked in DeFi was $240 billion. And what I do is, I tend to check the number on a daily basis, and today it is down to $46 billion. So, what is it that is going on, and how did so much of total value lock completely get wiped off?
Yeah, I think this is, it's actually very interesting that you mentioned this, because one thing I discover is that not many people really looking at the fundamentals. And I think the fundamentals are really key in really understanding in where we are, because it's not just about some tweet or some graphic that you see. I think it's also very important. And of course, a lot of TVL was lost during the Terra Luna implosion, and it hasn't really come back yet. So I think it's actually key. It's a really a key part for the crypto industry, because it's kind of the banking system of crypto. Really, it's where you can lend and borrow. And I think the fact is that the TVL has not increased. I think it is a sign that the interest and the sentiment is still relatively muted right now. So I think like monitoring those characteristics and those really fundamentals is really key to judge really when the market picks up. And initially, I thought kind of December it was a low, and I wrote a report how we're entering a new bull market now. But of course, the first leg was driven on the kind of the macro narrative that inflation comes off, and then people expect the U.S. central bank is going to stop hiking interest rates, and we're going to have this big rally. I mean, yes, we had the big rally, but also kind of like 2-3 weeks, I realized there wasn't really any real theme really driving the market. So we cannot really be in a new bull market unless we really have like a strong fundamental crypto theme developing. And of course, it cannot be ordinals, it cannot be meme coins. It needs to be something a little bit more juicy. And since we don't have it, we are still sort of in a little bear market, I would say.
What I think is, just a few weeks ago, or rather last week, what happened is that the US debt ceiling has been increased. Now, what I think is because of that news, maybe in the next coming days and weeks, the global cryptocurrency market might get a breather. But unfortunately, we have the SEC going after Coinbase and Binance. And so far as price predictions is concerned, Marcus, one thing that I've always said, all price predictions are 100% right 50% of the time. Now, keeping that quote in mind, are there any particular challenges or risks you believe that individuals and investors, particularly in the cryptocurrency space, needs to be aware about?
Yeah, the key aspect is depending on what you trade in crypto and what are you trying to achieve. I mean, the one metric, and I have like various metrics, and again, I publish sometimes through like the Substack or the institutional research or on LinkedIn. Kind of looking at some of those metrics when it really matters. I mean, people were very excited about, the paper meme coin, for example,
Yeah.
and I think I'm a favor in trading with momentum, and I think you can make money, really be riding this trend. But one thing I realized is that, for example, that the volume versus the market cap really started to decline, significantly. So suddenly the market cap was still relatively elevated around like 500 million, and we peaked around like 1.8 billion in terms of market cap for paper. But when we suddenly saw that volume was really decreasing, so people were suddenly not trading it anymore, people were just holding it, that kind of like meant also that not, new money is not really coming in. So, and this is just then a matter of time until the old money that has really bought it is going to say like, oh, let's just take some profit, let's liquidate. And then of course the exit door is very, very narrow, because nobody is really trading and volume is very low. And I think that's kind of like one of these factors that we're trying to like point out to people. Is like, hey, this is what's happening. Rather be careful and really have your stops in place, because the exit door is very narrow, and if more people want to kind of leave and get out, the price tends to like gap really aggressively lower, and people might lose money. So we're trying to really use kind of like the old TradFi skills of looking at the market structure, and helping the people to understand it a lot better.
Absolutely. And what I noticed particularly in 2022, ever since Facebook changed its name from Facebook to Meta, there was a lot of news surrounding Metaverse. And does your book actually mention or cover any news relating to, let's say, Metaverse or the hype surrounding it? Something to do with, let's say, Decentraland or the Sandbox as well?
Yeah, not that much. because they weren't really that impactful yet. And I think this might be something for book number 2.
Yeah,
So I think they're the interesting aspect with crypto is there's just so much happening, but those projects have not been really the driver of this bull market yet. But what it does is, it talks, of course, about the NFT boom. There are also some very interesting characters there. There's one character who has done basically all the booms, from setting up an exchange to setting up Bitcoin ATMs, to participating in the ICO, to really being on the forefront of the whole, NFT saga. And, again, it's just like a few pages, but it discovers and, a few interesting aspects, describes a lot. So I think within the book, people really learn so much. And, I think for some of those other projects, we just have to see now the next few months. But I think the book can be there can be added another 30, 40, 50 pages every year. And maybe some of the old material a little bit compressed. But I think crypto keeps evolving, and so will the book.
absolutely. Yeah. And one thing what I wanted to ask is, do you have any signature of any of the NFT artists as well? Probably who's someone who's an OG in the NFT artists in the 10 list of signatures that you plan to have.
Yeah, there's one person, but I have to see how I get to him. He's of course in the US. But I think it's again, I think it would be like an interesting achievement if we can get 10, 15 people within the book, and then give it for charity. And I think there might be somebody who's like, wow, this is this has never been put together like this, and I think this will be really a piece of history.
In this particular book, Marcus, are there plans to, let's say, have it in the near future in other languages or maybe an audio version as well?
Yeah, I've been looking into an audio version. There also um, work has been done to translate it into other languages. Yeah, but this is all a little bit like a slow working process because so much is going on, and yeah, I mean, because it's been such a busy week and everything. But yeah, the interest is there, and because we really want to facilitate the education of this and just make everybody smarter, and that's really what we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely, and hopefully we might be able to pay for the book. Let's say using Bitcoin, Lightning Network, and cryptocurrencies as well. Now we are towards the end of this episode, Marcus. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners, keeping in mind Crypto Titans?
Yeah, I think what a lot of people are really surprised, when they read the book is that we really had already 4 bull markets. People only kind of remember the 2017 bull market and of course the last one, but there were many others. And I think the interesting aspect is really that, as I said earlier, there are 420 million people involved in crypto. And this is still a relatively small number in the overall, population that could get involved. And I think it's just a matter of time until more people come. So I think I would really encourage everybody to keep on learning, to keep on educating themselves, and just be part of it, and really not miss it, because the demand and all the surveys indicate that the younger people are especially very interested in. So it's just a matter of time until the adoption just broadens out a lot more.
Absolutely brilliant. So what I'll do is, Marcus, in the show notes below, I'll definitely go ahead and mention all of your details for the book. I'll go ahead and mention your LinkedIn profile, your Substack channels, and maybe even meeting channels that you have as well. Now, I have 2 questions which are not related to Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, or blockchain. And the first one is, what is your favorite music genre?
Well, I haven't really listened to music for a long time, so so I think there is just no time. I listen a lot to podcasts. So I'm really happy to hear what you're doing, and yeah, so
Yeah, what I do is, I go to the gym for at least an hour, and the only thing that I listen to is podcasting. You can't listen to music and do workout. And the second question of what I wanted to ask is, you're an author of a book, but are there any books that you would like to recommend to our listeners?
yeah, I think some of the finance books are very important. I think some of the self-motivational books are important. And some of the books I think about entrepreneurship are very important, right? Because, the books about entrepreneurship is all about, being organized and having kind of, your house in order, and also looking at the longer term vision. And life is a little bit about the longer term vision, right? It motivates us, it helps us. And I would recommend kind of like those books.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so very much, Marcus, for doing this. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much once again. And I hope you have a great day and great week ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye bye.